泛黄的夜晚，霓虹灯璀璨，点亮黑暗，赶不走孤单。午夜和白天不停地转换，游走在街头，思念的孤单。相聚的狂欢总是很短暂，战友的怀抱总让我温暖。无聊的回忆让人很心烦，我又想你了，战友在哪端？没有你陪伴，我真的好孤单，我的心好慌乱，不知怎么办。没有战友的日子，我真的好茫然，整天就像丢了灵魂一般。没有你陪伴，我真的好孤单，我的心好慌乱，不知怎么办。你们不在身边，真的好不习惯，我的泪已流干，你们管不管？泛黄的夜晚，霓虹灯璀璨，点亮黑暗，赶不走孤单。午夜和白天不停地转换，游走在街头，思念的孤单。相聚的狂欢总是很短暂，战友的怀抱总让我温暖。无聊的回忆让人很心烦，我又想你了，战友在哪端？没有你陪伴，我真的好孤单，我的心好慌乱，不知怎么办。没有战友的日子，我真的好茫然，整天就像丢了灵魂一般。没有你陪伴，我真的好孤单，我的心好慌乱，不知怎么办。你们不在身边，真的好不习惯，我的泪已流干，你们管不管？
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our show this afternoon, The Legal Battle of the Century. I am Rachel, and today I have the honor to welcome my new co-host for the show, and her name is Nicole. And I will let Nicole say hi to everybody first.
Hi, everybody. This is Nicole, and thank you, Rachel, for inviting me to the show. And it's such a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nicole. So in the show, we're going to share a lot of research that Nicole and I did about the kleptocrat Wang Qishan and his family and how he managed to steal the wealth of 1.4 billion Chinese, and not just him, because he is just one of the kleptocrats that we're talking about that today existed in the CCP brutal communist regime. So we're going to dig a little bit deep today. But however, we start the show with the song of Miles, the recent release and immediately becoming a hit on many music charts like we see here. I want to just let you know on iTunes that I think we released on iTunes just yesterday, if I'm not mistaken, remember the date. I think it was just yesterday morning that I noticed iTunes started available for download. And within 24 hours, this is what Miles' new song Phoenix has achieved. I'm just gonna want KK to show you the picture what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's already up there. Thank you, KK. And basically, the song, the Phoenix, hitting the iTunes charts all over the place. Basically, #1 in Hong Kong, Taiwan, Macau, Cambodia, New Zealand, Hungary, Singapore, Laos, Finland, Mongolia, Fiji, and #1 on Hong Kong. Top song charts. This is a different charts, hits on iTunes, and this is achieved in within 24 hours. It's amazing, and this speaks loudly to the people, to the Chinese people, especially Chinese people, because the song is in Chinese language. The CCP has prevented them from making any voice heard. Cover their eyes, cover their ears, don't allow them to see what's really going on. But even though these people are managed to, raw, and the people scattered around the world who are anti-communism are supporting this movement of whistleblowing and the new federal state of China. So if you have not heard the raw of the people, either within and outside, and I think that's a bad sign, because that means the democracy will die if you don't hear so many people are rawing. And this phenomenon definitely, it's a best signal and signaling that there are so many people around the world are wishing to take down the CCP, because they already realize the evil nature of this communist regime. So we just want to mention that and in the beginning of the show. And you're welcome to download, if you have not downloaded that song on your phone, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Amazon Music or iTunes. I'm sure it will, like many other hit songs that released previously, will go on to Billboard in no time. So thank you for your support for this movement. Nicole, do you have anything to add before we start the show?
Definitely. Yes, I think musical is universal, and Miles Guo is trying to use the power, the strength of the music to take down the CCP. And I think every time when I hear his songs, and I think because Miles, he's really singing with his heart, and so it's always warmed my heart and brought tears into my eyes. And I think we understand his feelings. At the same time, I really appreciate Rachel is always be able to share with us her very alternative, very different perspective, but once again, just to help us to see if the CCP is not about how popular Miles Guo's music is, but I think more important is when the CCP, they're trying to block Miles' music, it is telling us how much they are afraid of Miles Guo. So that is a good sign. Thank you, Rachel.
Mm-hmm. And despite those interference and the song, made it to the #1 on so many charts, it really speaks loudly to the popularity of this movement. So So let's take a look the next slide. And let's go into the program. So last program we ended with a few key points. One of them I mentioned when people tell you that in China we have a private-owned enterprise and we have a state-owned enterprise, there's a distinctions between them. These are really illusion. These are basically not real. The reality is all of them, regardless how they divide, how they categorize, how they group them into different categories, they all belong to the kleptocrats. In the previous show, we mentioned there's about 100 family-ish. They are controlling the entire country. On the top, there are 3 major factions, and today we will share more information about that as well as we go along in this program today. And let's flip to the next slides. Particularly, we wanted to share with you the research that Nicole and I has done on this particular company. It's called HNA, and we all know that the kleptocrat that controls and owns HNA is Wang Qishan, who in the previous show I mentioned repeatedly was the vice premier of the People's Republic of China and was the head of a CCDI, which is the Central Committee of Discipline and Inspection, who carried out the 5 years anti-corruption campaign from 2012 to 2017. And then in 2018, she changed the leader. So Wang is no longer served in that capacity. Today we're going to tell you a lot of the details about it. So first of all, but we wanted to make this show not only about Wang Qishan. We wanted to let people understand this is a systematic issue. This is a communist regime. The totalitarian system is the problem. Wang Qishan is a phenomenon. Is just one of the phenomenon that we observed. Okay, so that is why we wanted, before we dive into HNA, this particular case study, we wanted to give you a review of the background in terms of the early days of the economic reform. What does that look like after Mao? Okay, so we will go over it, probably using 5 to a few minutes to talk about that, and then we dive into the HNA. So if you recall, if we can go to the next slides. With the chart. And we all know, Mao ruled China pretty much for almost close to 3 decades. So in the 3 decades, and this chart speaks, volume. In Mao's era, which is the red line, basically laying flat. Even the Chinese population has been growing. From the very beginning, I remember it was like 600 million, 400 million, and then to 600 million or even more at the end of the 1970s. But if you look at the charts, the GDP growth really, almost flat. There's no real increase. And the data, we also kind of are questioning it because during the Mao's era, there's a lot of human tragedies and humanitarian crisis, like we heard about the famine. Up to 50 million Chinese died of hunger and self-inflicted harm to each other. So these are completely humanitarian crises that happened. However, if you look at Japan in the same period of time after the World War II, and their economy is basically took off. The per GDP per capita increase is amazing. So when Deng took over from Mao at the end of 1978, and he realizes, we need to catch up. We have a lot of things to do, but first order is economy reform. This is where the comparison led to the decision of Deng wanted to open the door and to grow the economy. But however, as we mentioned, the fundamental principle of communists is they don't believe private ownership. Okay, communism is all about everything is controlled and owned by the state. So how do they do this? This is creating a conflict, a system conflict. If the government letting go the rights And then the system would be incentivized and regain the life they need, because under the communism everybody lack of motivation, they don't want to do things because everything they do and at the end of the day they're getting the same thing. So the system in the late 1970 and early 80, they're basically a dead pool of water. There's not much movement at all. There's no innovation, no motivation because of the system, right? So if we flip to the next slide, which is slide 5, so then in 1992, at the early stage, he made a comments about deciding to opening up for the Chinese market to welcome the investment and starting to make the dead water alive again. So he said, "Black cat, white cat." I think this is a very famous saying. Every Chinese knows the sentence. Black cat, white cat. What does it matter what color the cat is, as long as it catches mice? So it says we need to do something. Okay, we need to do something for the economy. So this is where it starts. So at early days, the World Bank played a very big role. If you recall, when China enacted the one China policy, it's also influenced by the World Bank, because at that time, when Deng Xiaoping said, "I want to grow economy, I'm going to welcome the foreign investment," so the World Bank give Chinese government, the CCP government, a lot of money. They call soft loans. So soft loans basically referring to loans that with no interest or barely any interest, very, very low interest. That's called soft loans, basically free money for help you to grow. Of course, there's that string attached, right? Because you're taking their money and they make their demands. At the time, I believe, at the early stage, they want China to become more open and more, democratic society, gradually transition from a communism to a, free market and democratic society. Through the pathway they lined, they outlined for the Chinese government, which is bottom 3. So when we first stage of economic reform under the World Bank advice, we are looking at performance improvement, because we know that there's no life in the communism system, right? Because people are not encouraged and motivated. So the very first thing they did is they trying to help people, to mobilize people's motivation, to make the system more efficient. So they incentivize people. At that time, we know the state-owned economy is everything is centralized control. So how much farmer is produced, what kind of crops you grow, and once you have the harvest, you all selling it to the government. So the government plans all. So everything is highly controlled and regulated. So when they started performance improvement, they have to give some incentives to those people people at the lower level to make their own decision, and also share some benefits with them. So incentivize them. So that's what they did in the stage 1. And then in the stage 2, I will be very quick, and then we're going to the actual case study. And Nicole will introduce you a lot of the things about that, and then we will try to give you, because this is too conceptualized without a real case, so it's hard to follow. So the second stage of economic reform is corporatization. So that is exactly the World Bank advised the Chinese Communist Party, say, you know what, you need to making sure that you continue improve your performance. The only way to do is corporatization. That means, make your state-owned enterprises, like letting control go, and establish a governance body. If we all know, in corporations, enterprises in the Western culture, we all have a board of directors, right? You have a highest governing body at the top, and then they kind of overseeing the operation of the company, and then making sure the shareholders' benefits and interests are served at the end of the day. So that's the concept of you have a governing body, you have somebody actually be responsible, but letting go of the day-to-day rights, how to run the organization, what to run, where to invest, to the lower executive level of people, right? So that's a concept of corporatization. That happened, the second stage. The last stage, I think, is a privatization. And however, all of those stages was under the guidance of the World Bank. However, I think something happened between the corporatization and to privatization that is not according to their plan. Instead of become more open and democratic society as the West wanted to see China to become, the Chinese the Chinese leaders become the kleptocrats because of human nature. When they see so much money at stake, when they have absolutely control, they want to redefine the relationship between the state and the enterprises because they don't want to let it go. Okay, they are facing about trillions of dollars, and they have the power. So they chose a way. They call them privatization, but really they put the public money into their own pocket. And this is where we're gonna disclose how Haihang, in English short for HNA, did that. And kleptocrats, one of them, Wang Qishan, managed to do it, and still managed to hide the wealth that he stole from the people all over the place. So let's welcome Nicole. Let's hear your research.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Thank you, Rachel. So first of all, I want to say some points is what I learned from the shows I watched. Rachel's show. I think some points is what I like about Rachel's show is I think all these cases and the crime seems to be very complicated. However, Rachel was able to use some keywords to help us to understand. So I think some of the keywords I have written down was follow the money, always follow the money, and then ask the right questions and do your own research. And I think I'm going to take this good opportunity because I've been listening. Miles Guo has been really taught me a lot, but I think this is a good time for me to assimilate what he has said and do my research and learn from it. And at the same time, I can share with you guys. And yes, I will start now. Okay, so I think Mr. Miles Guo revelation in 2017 started with HNA, Hainan Airline, and he revealed how the thieves' family carefully planned this shocking conspiracy and how they used the blue, gold, yellow, and its media money and use honey traps to compromise espionage targets. Methods to get a property for their family members and cronies. So the Wang family and cronies have built an incredible and interlinked huge capital chain at home and abroad by building many shadow banks. And through the intricate you have me, I have you, being together, mutual shareholding, mutual buying, mutual money, laundry, mutual connection, and behind the support of the state companies to sell, to buy shares. So in this way, the Chinese people's hard-working money accumulated for decades was stolen from the state-owned enterprises into their private companies' pocket. So, and below I'm going to share and how did the HNA, so Hainan Airline, grow and expand, and actually at the end they go bankrupt. But I think we probably will mention this in our next show for the details. So I think at the beginning from 1989 to 1993, it is the Hainan Airline. It is the state-owned property, and during the period 1993 to 1997, foreign money, foreign investment started to come into China. So Soros, American Airlines, bought 25% shares for $25 million in 1995. The transaction was approved by China's Ministry of Foreign Trade and Economic Cooperation during Zhu Rongji's tenure. So I think there will be some of the years I would like you to just pay a little bit attention to, because later on when I mention about Wang Qishan's rise, and I think you can see the connection between these years. So 1995 Soros, okay, and then Haihang went into another stage. So basically Haihang, the founding of the Hainan Airline Group. So Hainan HNA Group transformed from the state-owned assets into the private ones. In 1998, Hainan HNA Aircraft Maintenance Company, Hainan Qixing Industrial Investment Corporation Limited, Hainan Xiangyun Industrial Development Corporation Limited, Finance and Taxation Department of Hainan Province jointly invested 100 million to establish Hainan Harbor Shipping Holding Corporation Limited, so which is the predecessor of HNA Group. So I think this is about the second stage Rachel just mentioned, the corporatization. And then in 2003 and 2008, another two very important years, HNA received two investments of 1.5 billion each from the Hainan provincial government. Yes, and then I think if you watched Rachel's show last week, and you might remember the chart Rachel showed us, I think it's the FDI, is Rachel, sorry if I said it wrong. Was it correct? I think I remember you showed us.
Correct. Sorry, I was muted.
So no problem. I think that the chart showing you like in 2016 there was a surge, and then because 2013 for HNA was a crucial year, with HNA expanding more than 30 times. In 2016, the top 10 overseas M&A deals in the world, the HNA series accounted for 3 of them. And Bohai Financial Holdings acquired C2 for 9.995 billion. HNA Travel Group acquired a 25% stake in Hilton for 6.497 billion. HNA Group acquired Ingram Micro for 6.9097 billion US dollars. Okay, so you can see the progress. And then, so how did HNA grow so rapidly? So actually, HNA continues to grow and expand as Wang Qishan rises in financial and political status. Wang Qishan has been deeply involved in the financial field for many years, and his cronies are all over the major banks, which has also opened the door for HNA financing. So I think now,
so Nicole,
sorry.
Nicole, can I interrupt you for a second? I wanted just to kind of, because we have a PPT, I want to just kind of lay up a little bit before you dive into the rise of Won, because that's very interesting information. I want to just go to the slides number 9. Just for the audience, because before we're gonna dive in, this is our plan. Okay, so on the slide number 9, this is what we this is a thread that we will follow. So we would first talk about Wang Qishan and HNA's rise. So you will see how they rised, and you will draw the connections and correlations between Wang's rise, politically and economic rise, versus HNA's rise. Absolutely the parallel. Okay, without Wang, there is not gonna be HNA. And then we're gonna drill down the ownership of the HNA, just like the Pax lawyer Eddie Moss drilled down Mile School for the ownership of the Sherry Netherland Hotel, which we answered. You know, we said who owns the place and where the money come from. But we're gonna do the same thing, and we're gonna ask the same question to Wang and HNA, and we're gonna see what's actually indeed happened. And then the third bullet point is architecture art project. This is going to be a new vocabulary. This is going to be something you probably would have a epiphany, or surprised. You would say, oh, you know, I don't believe you, because this is a top secret from the CCP kleptocrats we're going to review, and which was disclosed and reviewed by Miles previously. So we're going to share with you, and you will learn what is architecture art project. And the first bullet point is we're going to talk about why gloves fade. And if you recall the vocabulary that I mentioned in previous show, that what is white gloves? So we were talking about their fate. They're public figures. Some of them, the person we're going to talk about particularly in this show is the death of Wang Jian, who was the chairman of HNA, and he died in 2018. So this is the thread that we're going to carry on our show. And today we will not be able to finish all of them, but we will try, and we will stop where, when an hour mark ends, but then we will pick the rest of them up in our next show. Okay, so Nicole, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Rachel. So I'm going to talk about the relationship between HNA and Wang Qishan. So as I mentioned, development of HNA, I think there are certain years, and you might have paid attention to maybe 1995, 1997, 2007, and 2008. Okay, so let's have a look at Wang Qishan's rise in financial and political status. I think the first stage actually is for him to meeting and finding the right person. Okay, I think Wang Qishan was born in Qingdao, and I think after graduating high school, Wang worked as a sent-down youth in the countryside, performing manual labor with peasants on a commune in the revolutionary heartland of Yan'an, where he met and befriended Xi Jinping, who is the president in CCP. Okay. So, and I'm thinking maybe it's because of the hardship he experienced and made him decided to change his life totally. And maybe he didn't really want that kind of life anymore. Or maybe he felt like he was treated as a slave. And so he wanted to become a slave owner to enslave people himself. And not only Xi Jinping, and I think and then he met another very important person, another important family, Yao family. And Yao Mingwei, who is Wang Qishan's high school classmate, and his sister, his elder sister, whose name is Yao Mingshan. And so the daughter of Yao Yiling will mention later. And they met. So Wang met Yao Mingshan, and then they got married 2 years after. Okay, and Yao Yiling, the father of, so basically the father-in-law, and he became an alternate member of the Central Secretariat, and later on, Wang was elevated to the Secretariat's office on rural policy research, and this actually marked the beginning of Wang's political career. I would say this will be the first stage, and after that, and I think Wang started to have built up his financial background, and I think he's a quite talented man, quite smart. And so in 1988, you can see from the PowerPoint, he became the chief executive of the Agriculture Investment Trust of China, and in 1994, and he became the governor of the China Construction Bank. And next year, it is very important. So in 1995, Wang facilitated a cooperation with U.S. investment bank Morgan Stanley and was instrumental in the founding of China's first investment bank, okay, and the China International Capital Corp, and served as its first executive chairman. So, and if we're looking back, 1995, and it's the same time Soros American Airlines bought 25% shares for $25 million in 1995, and the transaction was approved by China's Ministry of Foreign Trade and Economic Cooperation. Okay, I think talking about CICC, Rachel, I think you have something to add, right? Mike.
Sorry, I muted myself, so I just unmute. So you can see the Wang's rise is definitely not accidental, because in the very early age he met the right people, as Nicole just mentioned about, through Yao Mingwei and through Yao Mingwei's sister. And then Yao Yiling, we forgot to mention, I'm not sure whether Nicole you mentioned it or not, Yao Yiling is actually the vice premier of the People's Republic of China, I think in 1988 to 1993. So he is a very powerful CCP top kind of leaders, because he was among the Politburo Standing Committee. As you recall, if you watched the last episode, we've talked about what is Politburo Standing Committee and how many of them, only 7 of them, and they're the highest decision-making organ in the CCP party. So anyway, so his father-in-law is almighty, basically they're the leader. So based on that, so she had a very good springboard to start. Okay, and then he's probably a smart and intelligent young man. He worked, if you can see from Nicole's introduction, he worked a lot with the early days working with a foreign World Bank. Channeling the loans to the rural area, taking those zero interest loans from World Bank, and to help the the deprived places in China to grow economically. So So his early stage is in banking, in finance, and in 1995, he served as executive chairman of the Chinese International Capital Corp. It's also not a coincidence because this is the first fully foreign joint stock investment company that the Chinese government have ever created. So in 1995, the CICC is the first organization. So I have a picture here, if I can ask KK to show us, that I want to just talk to you why the significance of he becoming the executive chairman of that organization. I believe that year he actually made quite a bit friends, even prior to that, because you have to have connections to be able to be appointed in that kind of a position. So CICC, it was incorporated in 1995 by the Chinese Construction Bank. Okay, so here I mentioned about Chinese Construction Bank because we all know in 94, Wang was the head of the Chinese Construction Bank. And then Morgan Stanley, okay, Wall Street tycoon at that time has already working closely with Wang. And then China National Investment and Guarantee Corps, and then GIC and Mingli Corporation as the first Sino foreign joint venture investment bank. Okay, CICC, that's ever first, and that the executive chairman is Wang Qishan. So you would know he's basically the founding father of the modern financial banking sector in China. Let's put that way. Okay, that's Wang. And at the time of the CICC's incorporation, China Construction Bank and Morgan Stanley were its largest shareholder, and with each 42.5% and 35% of interest, respectively. But this is interesting. In 2010, Morgan Stanley sold its holdings to a number of companies, and one of them is TPG. So if you have followed the show, you will know who PTG is and what's the relationship PTG has with PAG. The plaintiff in this case, in Miles Gordon versus PAX case. So the PTG's former managing partner is Shan Weijian. In many shows, in previous episodes, we mentioned multiple times that he is a registered CCP spy. He works for CCP, basically. Although he's, he's Ivy League school graduates and successful venture capitalist managing $45 billion US, blah blah. Anyway, so he was up to 2010. He was a managing partner of TPG, and in that same year, 2010, he moved to PAG. Okay, Pacific Asia Group as the chairman and CEO. Okay, so this is the linkage you will see. Okay, this is a starting. You will see Miles's whistleblowing all ties in together. Okay, and TPG is the 44% interest holder for HBO Vice. Right? We talk about that in previous shows, but all this all together. So this is the significance of the CICC. That's the very first investment bank formed with foreign money. Okay, go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Rachel, for adding very important information. Thank you. And so, and then I think so after 1995, and so we're coming to 1997, so Wang was transferred to Guangdong to become its executive vice governor, and I think he started his political path. And then if we're looking at if we look at HNA's growth and the founding of HNA Group, so in 1998, and they established Hainan Harbor and Shipping Holding Corporation Limited. And in 2003 and 2008, HNA received two investments of 1.5 billion each from the Hainan provincial governments. And I think we can see the connection there. Yes, and then in 2007, he became a member of the 17th Central Committee and the 17th Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party. In 2008, he was named a vice premier of the State Council in charge of finance and commons. I think that definitely benefit HNA's growth, I think. And Rachel, do you want to add something, or shall I carry on?
Yeah, and in the 2017, that's another year I wanted to mention because that's a slide number 12, if we can show that slide. So what Nico just lined up for you is the rise of Wang politically and also, economically, basically. Wang Qishan is rooted in banking and finance, and also later on with the father-in-law and the help, and he is gaining a political track as well. So on the slide number 12, this is another company. It's confusing, I know. It's CIC. So we just talk about the CICC, right, which stands for the China International Capital Corporation. So this is a China Investment Corporation, which was established in 2007 September. Okay, so the People's Republic of China had the excuse that why they want to establish that is because I remember who is already in the PRC's top, the Politburo standing, Wang Qishan already. So that's why he has the power to establish whatever he wants. So he decided to establish another, investment kind of a related corporation. And this time he is airing for the currency reserve, of the country. So at that time, we buy a lot of American debts. We have 1.4 trillion US dollars in currency reserve. And rather than let the money sit, Wang wants to use that money, and to start purchasing stuff. You thought for the benefits of the state, but really, it is not. What if it's not for the benefit of the state? What if the purchasing is all for his own good? So this is made a headline. This is New York Times report because it's a lot of money. So the China Investment Corporation purchased a $3 billion stake in Blackstone. Okay, that's on May 20th, 2007. The news was published. And using the foreign reserve. And if we flip back to the charts where it says 2007, Wang become a member of 17th Politburo of the CCP. And the power, and there, one person's name that Nicole mentioned, you probably haven't paid attention because Zhu Rongji. So Nicole just mentioned in 1990s, right? During the 1990s, 1995, 1994, a lot of the financial things was looking after by the vice premier at that time, which is Zhu Rongji. So Zhu Rongji and Wang Qishan had a very close relationship very early on just because they all working in the financial industry. And when the CIC in 2017 has been established, when this $3 billion investment decision has been made, Zhu Rongji's son, Zhu Yunlai, sorry, it's going to be confusing because there's a lot of kleptocrats and their families. So we're going to try to slow down when we talk about names and relationships. So Zhu Rongji, the previous vice premier in 1993 to 1998, I think, maybe I was wrong a little bit, but anyway, his son, Zhu Yunlai, partnered with Wang Qishan and Wang Qishan's mistress, Gao Yanyan. They together invested $30 billion into Blackstone. Okay, so you remember that. Okay, and another things I want to share with you is a CICC and CIC, they actually has a cross-shareholding. They have a cross-shareholding relationship. So in 2004, the CICC has divested its a little bit interest and shareholding, and then CIC purchased it later on. So there's a lot of ins and outs and transactions, very complicated and very convoluted. We're not going to go to the details, but just so you know, Wang is the know-how person, and later on had a political power and network that he has established very early on in his early working days with the foreigner, which World Bank, United States, and Wall Street. So he has well connected. He used his network that's prepared a board. And then he seized the political power within China and also the know-how in the financial and banking sector. Okay, so this is what I want you to remember. And then we can continue. So, Nicole, you can take away. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, so much for recapping the key concepts for me. Thank you very much. And so now let's have a look at the Wang's relationship with all the shareholders in HNA. And so although Israel Hannes, the former Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of International Trade, served as the Vice President of HNA Capital. But in fact, HNA has always been controlled by the Wang Qishan family, and it has been transformed from a state-owned enterprise into a completely private enterprise. How did he do it? Via the architectural art project.
So Nicole, sorry.
Sorry.
You're going to jumping down to the architect. Sorry, before that, I wanted to talk about the HNA Rise, and I want to tie the dots together for the audiences. Is that okay?
Oh, yes.
Because I'm on slide 13.
Sorry, I skipped.
Okay, no problem. So I'm gonna come back and let's, because we still have a few more and about the ownership of HNN, and then we go into details about the architecture art project. Okay, so if you follow the slides. So I'm gonna dive into slides number 13. And Nicole, please, kind of interrupt me when you want to say something, because I know you prepared quite a bit in terms of how HNA Rise, and you mentioned a little bit earlier. You just kind of quickly went through it. So here the slides. I wanted to let people know, if you're not familiar with HNA, especially maybe Western audiences, you don't know what's HNA, looks like, and this will tell you what kind of a company, how big it is. In terms of the assets managed. So, and they achieved this less than 2 decades. Basically, less than 2 decades. And they also bankrupt, within the same decades. That's where it's fishy, and that's why we wanted to let you know how they play the game and how they play those, plots. So they transformed from a domestic airline, as Nicole mentioned. They started very humble with just a domestic airline in Hainan province, to a Fortune Global 500 conglomerate. They have 400 entities. This company has 400 subsidiaries. Can you imagine their accounting book? My hair gonna stands up when you're trying to consolidate all 400. It's like Mission Impossible. But anyway, the numbers are not real, so don't bother. With 147.4 billion in assets as of June 2017. They started 2000, and then by June 2017, they found 20 million to 147.4 billion. I think the Ivy League business school needs to study this company, because if they believe this is real, then they could try to emulating it and repeating it and see whether you can create this miracle in a normal normal circumstances. I bet you can. So, because it's a Ponzi scheme. So with more than 400 entities and subsidiaries, HNA was the most prominent private sector contributor to China's outbound merger and acquisition wave between 2015 and 17. That's exactly what Nicole mentioned about the charts that I had in the last show showed you, right? So it's right now still on the screen, but it's at the right-hand bottom. The spikes, the 2016 spikes, it's unable to be explained clearly to people why the spikes. So here is the answer. So 2016 marked the peak of HNA's ambition when its overseas acquisitions reached 12.7% of total China outbound merger and acquisition volume that year. Although the charts I'm showing you is a foreign direct investment, it's not really merger and acquisition. But I would think that the foreign direct investment is probably bigger than merger and acquisition, because merger and acquisition is just one way of investment. So, but anyway, it's accounted for 12.7%, one company in that year. So you could think how much of the spike that we see here is contributed by the HNA. However, this is where you always you always pay attention to the but or however, those transition words, what's coming after that. However, much of the shopping sphere was fueled by debt. Between 2015 and 2017, HNA borrowed a total of 45.7 billion, mainly through leveraged loans. Okay, so Nicole, let me ask you a question. We've talked a lot about where Wang Qishan's background comes from, what's his forte and where he gathered his power. So let me ask you, what do you think the money come from? Where did they get the loans?
People, the 老百姓, as Stephen Bannon mentioned, 老百姓, it's their money. And also it's like the state owned, so it's like all the public properties belong to everyone in China, the 老百姓, I think.
Exactly. You're right on. I'm gonna tie the dots for you. Okay. So we talked a lot about the Wang Qishan's influence in the banking industry and the financial affair in the country, right? And he worked in those. Remember he was the head of the China Construction Bank, and later on, China Construction Bank married with Morgan Stanley with other in 2015 and created CICC, and then later on created CIC. So he is the one that controls everything. So, and in the banking industry, is the least industry that's opened up to the foreign investor, because in the banking industry, pretty much 98% of the banking is controlled by the CCP, by these kleptocrats. So if they want to get loaned from those banking system, they can, because they have so much assets on the book, right? They have 147.4 billion assets. So they easily get leveraged loans from their own banking, from their own pockets. Do you know what I'm saying? But the pockets is still under public. It's so-called public and state-owned banking system, even though there's no state-owned concept, because whoever controls the financial affair in the country controls all the banks in China. So they can decide whatever they want to do. They can print money. They can use the reserve currency to purchase whatever they want. Okay, so they do whatever they want. But Wang Qishan is using the public money that he only is supposed to be a custodial of, right? Because he's a vice state council, right? Vice premier of a state council and in charging of finance and commerce. So he's the only agency on behalf of the people. But in China, we don't have democracy. We don't have duly elected official. They could be official for life, just like what she is doing, right? She could be the emperor the third term. But anyway, so he managed to use his power and pariahs to secure the loans from the bank that he is looking after. But he moved the money from the 老百姓, because 老百姓 put their savings, their life savings, to the bank, right? China has the highest savings still among a lot of other countries, because the Chinese people do not have welfare. They still have to pay tons of money when they get cancer. They have to pay for medications. If they wanted, foreign medications to kill their cancer, they would have to pay out of pockets for, a lot of them. So that's why they save money for those rainy days. They have to pay for those things, right? So we have highest savings among a lot of developed countries. So that is why the kleptocrats is looking towards those monies that saved by 老百姓 here. So absolutely, Nicole, you're right. The money is coming from the public money and into their own funding and purchasing and shopping sphere, which is, if HNA is owned by people, by the state, then that's fine, right? You can't say they're stealing. But this comes down to our second question. If we go to the slide number 14, the second question, because we just answered, where did the money come from? So the money come from 老百姓, deplorables, their savings in the bank, who Wang Qishan is supposed to oversee and look after. But he used those money to fund his shopping sphere at HNA. So the matter comes in here now is who owns HNA? If HNA is still owned by Chinese people, let's use the communist, deception words, state-owned for a second here. If they're still state-owned, then you may say he's not really stealing, right? He maybe, foremost, is mismanaging, misappropriating funds, but not stealing. But here, let's drill down who owns HNA. This ownership is very important. Nicole, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. And I think Wang Qishan basically used his political power, and because he's been in the financial background for very many years, and he's a very bright man, so he built this very intricate map. Yes, and to just like set up the plan to how he can steal the money, and so from the corporate, like the three stages, to make it like from the corporatization to the privatization. And I also think it's quite interesting is the chart you showed us is like between 1950 to 1978. During those 28 years, and the world economy shows like China, the progress is almost flat. But in 2016, which is like after 28 years, actually, Hainan Airline expanding more than 30 times. So
That's
if you compare this, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's almost like a none or crazy. There's something wrong with both because they're both extreme, right? When you compare with what's considered norm, when you're looking at Japan, when you're looking at other country, it's something is wrong because we know today fundamentally what's is wrong. The system is wrong because the communist system should be banned. Throughout the world, they should be banned. And today we know the communism are not admitting their communism. A lot of communism are, taking other forms and making another label. But if they're full of lies, they're communism. If they're full of, they lying to you and trying to, concentrate their power, trying to concentrate the wealth, they're communism. So I think we need to let people to understand the label can change. They could call whatever, fascism, communism, socialism, but the essence, how they do it and the methods they're using are the same, pretty much the same. So let's take a look at the ownership because we're already in 50 minutes into the show. So we probably have 10 more minutes and then we're wrapping up and we will continue our next show next week, Wednesday. So here let's go to the slides number 15. So this is a news that reported by CNBC on July 25th, 2017, and also by many other news media outlets. It says a huge Chinese conglomerate just reviewed its ownership. Ooh, and a lot of governments are watching. Why governments are watching? Because HNA is not usual. A company that accumulated, just as Nicole said, 30 times bigger than, oops, sorry, I need to stop for a second because my computer is going to be out of battery. Sorry, Nicole, if you can take a little bit, I'm going to plug my computer and come back.
Okay, yeah, okay, I think maybe we can have a look at the change of the ownership in 2017. Okay, and so from the chart, you can see the main shareholder, his name was Guan Jun, and 50% is Wang Jian, and 15% is the Chen Feng, and 23% is the Cihang Foundation. Okay, and so I think probably in our next episode, we're going to talk about what are the roles for Wang Jian and Chen Feng in HNA. And Guan Jun, I want to mention is he's taking the main shareholder. Actually, he is Wang Qishan's illegitimate son. So here we can bring out another kind of concept, architectural art project. What do you think, Rachel?
Yeah, I'm back. Thank you, Nicole, for covering for me. Yeah, because my computer was out of battery and it alarmed me that it's going to shut off. So I have to plug in. I forgot. So thank you. I can take over and maybe spend a little bit of time explaining this, and then we will lead way to the architecture art project next week that we're going to talk about. So if we can go back to the slide number 15. So basically, this is a news reported by CNBC. It says HNA has started as a small airline and has now evolved into a giant global conglomerate with stakes in big names like Deutsche Bank and Hilton, which Nicole shared with you earlier. It's among several major Chinese firms, which include Wanda, Anbang, Fuxing, Fosun, that have spent billions in recent years on overseas acquisition fueled by debt. Okay, so here I wanted you to pay attention. It's not just HNA. That means it's not just a one kleptocrat. We're dealing with so many of them. And Wanda, Anbang, Fosun. Remember last show that I tried to train and condition your brain to think? When you're thinking about enterprise, when you're thinking about a company, you have to ask the question, which kleptocrats controls them and owns them? Okay, so if you ask that question, that means you become much smarter than before you watch the show. So anyway, that's the right question. And remember that last show I talked about Xi created those irrational outbound foreign direct investment categories. Remember that? And he restricted certain areas. One area is entertainment, sports team. Remember that? And foreign investment, financial investment. These are restricted foreign direct investment area. And at that show, I told you every single sector stands for, there's kleptocrats and people stands behind it. So here, Wanda is exactly the entertainment, is exactly what Xi faction is calling off, because Wanda is owned by Jiang faction and they have been purchasing Hollywood. So if you're looking at, if you can go Google, they're purchasing a lot of entertainment business and AMC, the movie theaters, and Anbang and Fosun, exactly what the Xi wants to forbidding them making investment. Okay, so this is internal infection. That's why. But all of them, all of the kleptocrats, regardless, they're fighting with each other. And they are all sucking money from the deplorables because all of their acquisition are fueled by the debt. And that money belongs to the 1.4 billion people. And all of them have the commonalities here. It's also underlined at the last sentence. It's called complex deal structures and murky ownership. This is a key. Murky ownership. In Miles's case, we have explained so clearly who owns the apartment at Sherry Netherlands and where the money come from. But these complex deal structure and murky ownership cannot be explained, because the day they explained that ownership, they got caught. So this is why I go to the next slides, which is slide 16, which Nicole touched a little bit on. But the interesting thing is, I wanted to put this in your mind. The ownership of HNA changed in 2017. And the change, the news was bloated out in June and July-ish. Okay, the time is important, and we explain the change of ownership later. But I wanted KK to show you the slides number 18. Okay, this is what I think, and you can draw your own conclusion. You don't have to agree with me or disagree with me. You're free thinker. So my thinking is, why they change the ownership in the second half, in the middle of the year, is because in April 2017, in a number of live stream whistleblowing broadcasting that Miles Guo did on YouTube, he basically told the entire world that Wang and his family were the hidden owners of the HNA. Okay, so the charts next to it is Guan Jun, the mysterious businessman. Guan Jun, named Guan Jun, used to hold 29.5% of HNA share, but suddenly made a, crazy decision, donating $18 billion to a US-based charity. Who would do that? Who would do such a dramatic, I don't know, you can call it, philanthropy if you wanted to believe that way. Donate $18 billion to a newly created US-based Hainan Cihang Charity Foundation. The foundation was created in the year prior, in 2016, and then he donated all of them. And that's the change. That's the ownership change. If we flip back to the slide 16, that's the only thing that changed. Everything else stayed the same. Chen Feng, Wang Jian, each, they're the co-chairman of the HNA. Each owns 15% of this gigantic, conglomerate. Okay, so they're supposed to be super rich, because remember, they have $146.64 billion in assets. So, and then China-based the Zhihang Foundation, which was partially managed by the Hainan province government, Chinese government, owns 22.8%. And then Hainan Airline Holdings owns 0.5%. And then Guan Jun donated his share of Hainan to a foundation in 2017. And this is what I found interesting. This is the Financial Times commenting. If we can go to the slide 17. HNA, they made a comments about these two people. As I just mentioned, they each earning 50% of that huge company that had 400 subsidiaries. And they're supposed to be super rich, right? But this is what Financial Times said. HNA's very complex and convoluted shareholding structure has prevented either man's inclusion on the annual Hurun list of China's richest men and women. According to Hurun founder, he said, we have been trying to get Chen Feng, which is the gentleman on the right, on the list of the richest men and women in China. But we just cannot find any way to show that he got enough money. I wonder why is that? Okay. And if we go to slide number 19, and you can Google it, and I would just want to show you, these are the reports all over the internet, okay, regarding the donation of 18 billion from Guan Jun to the US-based charity. So that year was a very noisy year. Absolutely. If you go search on the internet, there's so many reportings regarding that event. So it say, after 30 billion in cross-border deals, China's HNA says it's all about charity. The 30 billion in cross-border deals referring to the 2015 HNA has purchased and acquired, a lot of assets overseas. So now suddenly they're saying it's all about charity. Do you believe them? Have they ever worked on any welfare for the Chinese people? No. But suddenly they say it's about charities. And then the second Bloomberg report say, HNA Foundation tells New York it's not raising funds in New York. So then why on earth you come to New York and set up a nonprofit and charitable organization? Right? Why do you make that declaration? The nonprofit says it will register as a charity that only hold funds, but we're not interested in fundraising in New York. We're not taking New York donors' money. So why you come to New York then? That's another question. You can ponder it over. And then New York Times, it says, behind an 18 billion donation to a New York charity, a shadowy Chinese conglomerate, HNA. So there's so many clouds around that. No wonder in 2017, June, July-ish, they reviewed their so-called ownership under the pressure. So I think our time is up. And I want to give maybe the last minute to Nicole. Nicole, do you have anything to end? And then we tie up, and then we will come back maybe in our next week to talk about the architect art project.
Okay, thank you. So I think I want to add one thing is a report from New York Times in February 2017, because they have decrypted the HNA group. So in the report titled Trump Aids Deal with Chinese Firm Raises Fear of Tangled Interests, and it mentioned one major shareholder, Guan Jun, and who just after donating 18 billion, listed his address in a rundown apartment in Beijing, picturing a filthy hallway outside his door, a decaying bed, and a bag of trash hung from its frame. But according to the record, he might directly own more than a quarter of the shares of HNA. So from here, I think if you donate money and you're wealthy, you're rich, and also when you are rich, you're able to donate. But obviously, I think once after Moscow's broadcasting, they want to hide the identity. That's why they made him look like someone who's that poor, which doesn't matching the donating 18 billion at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of question here. So we can go to the slide number 20, and this is where we end, is who is Guan Jun? And because in order to explain who is Guan Jun, we would have to explain, the key concept and the key project, the top secret that CCP was holding. It's the architectural art project. So I think that's conclude our show today. We hope you enjoy it. And thank you very much, Nicole, for sharing your research. And thank you, KK, for your support on the OBS. And next week, we will come back and we will explain who is Guan Jun. And we continue with the revealing, the revelations on the HNA. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, KK.
他们的恐惧是我们的武器，我们的胜利。谢谢了，兄弟姐妹们，你们健身了吗？行动，行动，行动！中共，你完了 ！Take down the CCP！
For the games you want to play, bring it on and I will fight to the end. Just watch and see. It's all started, everything's begun, and you are over. Cause we're taking down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共，
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
中共，你完了！干灭中国共产党这个 CCP， 才能让我们远离恐惧。Take down CCP。
They try to scare the nation with fabrication, but we see through the lies. We won't fall, we will fight you back. Police corruption with crooked assumption. They ran our lives, but no more. We will win. We will take down the CCP. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. We will fight till they're all gone. We rejoice when there's no more. Let's take down the CCP. They have all lied for too long. We will end what they do wrong. Spread the word all through Hong Kong. Let's take down the CCP. Let the bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
站起来吧！
Let the bullets fly a little
为
longer.
奴役的人
Let
们
the bullets fly a little longer.
行动！
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
行动！
Let the bullets fly a little
你
longer.
完了
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
！Take down CCP。
Bullets fly a little longer, and you will surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer. We will have freedom to live. We will win. You'll surrender. Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little
CCP。
longer.
Take down
Let the bullets fly a little longer.
Take down the evil CCP.